be getting into some interesting symbolism related to predictive programming. We're really interested in the unicorn symbolism and the one-eye symbolism that we're getting out of the I Pet Goat movie that Enter the Stars put out and made us think of the Istanbul location. And so I'm going to introduce Chris and she'll take it away, and I'll just respond as we go along.
We're looking at this show that Enter the Stars put out, and I was just totally fascinated with all of the research that he's done with showing how this mosque is from Istanbul, Turkey. And on their map, it's called the Golden Horn, and it represents a rhinoceros horn. And then I Pet Goat Video has this rhinoceros head and horn that the mosque is sitting on, and Horus rises out of it with the one eye. The symbolism of the Boston bomber also in this predictive programming that we have, and all these things that are in sequence with what's going on. And he's saying that this is a representation of Turkey, of Russia bombing this mosque in Turkey. So, but before, we had this Boston bombing, and the so-called terrorists had his eye damaged, and that was a symbolism. And then he did this. They were the Sunni Muslim that they had this symbolism because they do the same dance and they wear the same Suri dance outfits that Horus did in this video.
In the 13th century, while most Turkish Muslims worshipped in iconic mosques, an entirely new display of praise began to gather a following. Known as the Sema ritual, it was the vision of Sufi master Rumi. The purpose, to honor Allah and chronicle the spiritual path man must take on the journey to enlightenment. Samarkandis from the Mevlevi order of whirling dervishes are the only ones allowed to perform the ceremony. It's captivating for us, but meant for the heavens. A powerful display performed in a trance-like state.
While we learn, we say Allah. It's the name of the God. We don't think anything about our family, our work, other people, just Allah.
Portion of his video looking at where the rhinoceros is in this mosque. Very interesting.
Süleymaniye Mosque. How many servants have met their God inside me? From all over the world, millions of people came and touched my walls. Süleymaniye Mosque. Today, everyone calls me. Such stories were experienced under my doom. All of them are still with me, but there is a special one. The famous Suleiman the Great, whose words was considered law, he commanded Sinan. The master of stones rolled up his sleeves, and he made a masterpiece.
And then Casey pointed out all the fives in this with the explosion, and on the mountain thing here you have the five symbol of five, and there's a lot of fives that he dug up on there. But five in Pythagorean numerology is the number of chaos, and so what they do is they create chaos so they can impose their order, and that's the symbolism that we're seeing here. And one of the things that was interesting to me is the Monoceres constellation is the unicorn, and we'll have to do a separate show on that. But the rhinoceros is named after this unicorn constellation that represents Horus, which is the false Christ. And there was a tapestry that was filmed with the Rockefellers explaining this. And like I said, we'll have to do another show on that. But it's just fascinating, all of the symbolism, with the pomegranate tree and Persephone and all of these things that tie into it. And, in the iPet Goat video, we see when the false Christ comes out after the Horus rises from the mosque, and you see the false Christ birth in the Anubis boat, and he has the Aten sun on his head, which Akhenaten worshipped, which represents Mercury. So I just find that interesting. And, Enter the Stars also had this movie that we had in ours too, 007.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it had the skeleton dancer that was in the iPet Goat. And then you see the skeleton on top on the specter. But not only that, there was a one-eyed showing the one-eyed symbolism again in that movie that we showed in our last video. And then in that other movie that we showed with the eye of Horus and him putting the eye in his head. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism of war. See all the celebrities making the one eye symbolism. Even the popes did the one eye symbolism in the 666, and then you got CERN. So you have all this symbolism that is all tied together. That's just in sequence. I mean, it's such synchronicity in the movies and videos and predictive programming, and symbolism is just everywhere right now. And the Economic Magazine for 2016, the unicorn is a symbol of the third eye. And so you see this guy wearing a blue hat representing Mars, the god of war, and he has some sunglasses on that says Pi upside down, which is representing the Indo-Europeans, and it's a bloodline of the silver thread. And so he's representing this, that he has the third eye open. I don't know who he is, so if anybody knows who this guy is, then let me know.
Yeah, and it connects to Zechariah chapter 11, verse 17, where it says, "Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword will be on his arm and on his right eye. His arm will be totally withered and his right eye will be blind." And I find that totally relates to this one-eye symbolism that they like to do, because they basically are telling you that they followed the left-hand path. And the left-hand path is the rejection of Jesus and being the worthless, they follow the worthless shepherd, And so very, very interesting. I find it's just really, as you say, the synchronicity of it coming together with the Syrian conflict, the Iranians, the Russians, the Iraqis, the Kurds, everybody, ISIS, Barry Jihad, Obama, everybody all sitting there right on that Syrian border.
But this is relevant as it pertains to a time frame, especially with what's going on. Now, the capital of the Ottoman Empire was Istanbul, that formerly Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire. Of the 8 locations that were specified in the Gog prophecy of Ezekiel 38, and I know a lot of you've got your faces in Ezekiel 38 and 39, 5 were located firmly within Turkey: Magog, Meshech, Tubal, to Gorma and Gomer. These are all areas that were within the boundaries of modern Turkey. The primary group that carried out the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, we all know that it was the Romans. We just say, oh, the Romans, the Romans destroyed the temple. But this was the 10th legion of the Roman army, which was stationed in Antioch. The people who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD are the ancestors, folks. They're the ancestors of the people who in the last days will be the primary followers of the Antichrist who is to come and who will attack Israel. Antioch is located within the borders of Turkey on the southeastern corner of Turkey near Syria. The people of the prince who is to come, Daniel 9:26, that's a verse that I know all of you are familiar with, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. This speaks of the Roman Empire destroying Jerusalem and the temple, which occurred in AD 70, who were stationed in Antioch. Take special note of the fact that the prince was yet to come. Only the people of the prince were the ones who destroyed Jerusalem. This tells us that the Antichrist will come from a future revived Roman Empire.
Another thing with that video, an iPad goat, that the Boston bomber, the region that he came from, they fought for independence from Russia for centuries, and so I just found that fascinating. That's also tied into this video with Russia. And then you have this Boston bombing, the one eye. And then you have them fighting for independence from Russia. And then you have this possible bombing from Russia to this same area. It's just beyond believable. All the research that Casey did, pinpointing all of these things together, is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and it's flaming the Civil War, the chaos side of things. And I think that's what we saw with the Marvel's universe. They seem to be transitioning with this next phase of the Marvel universe into this Civil War, this Captain America Civil War faction. Of course, you got the Old Order, which is Captain America, the dinosaur from World War II, the nationalistic man. He represents the nation of America, Captain America. Where you got this Tony Stark kind of like a globalist. The UN, he would represent the UN, and Captain America would represent the United States, where Tony Stark, the evolved UN guy, fighting the nationalistic, patriotic Captain America. And
they become frenemies, right?
Yeah, that's the word.
This isn't going to change what happened. I don't care. He killed my mom.
So basically, we got the transhumanists, globalists, billionaire UN, Kurzweil, Bill Gates, destroying America so that they can have their one world order. And you can see that the Ezekiel 38 is all lined up right now, right there, over there in Syria. Basically sums up all this, what we're getting into, which is the end times. Exactly. It's the end game. We're watching the end game, and all this stuff is playing right into it.
Right. And they're going to want to take our guns.
And this is a special show because this is a crowd participation show. We are going to piece together all the puzzle pieces to this Orlando Matrix. And this was driven home today to me about this whole thing between the kingdom of lies and the kingdom of truth, and that we live in this age of deception, and that by being anchored biblically, you're anchored to the spirit of truth, which is Jesus Christ. So this show is going to be called Decoding the Eye of Orlando. We're going to call it Rituals because it is rituals when you look at it after we present the information. I think, Chris, why don't we start off where we got involved with Orlando in the first place? And I don't know if people remember, we originally really got involved with the Sol Invictus games way before other people caught on to it.
Finally tonight, celebrating wounded warriors in our country and around the world. The Invictus Games have begun. and those warriors now competing again. Tonight, Robin Roberts with the First Lady and Prince Harry.
How did you approach your grandmother?
Mrs. Obama came to us with the challenge, and I didn't know what to do. She dragged her husband into it, happened to be the president.
Dragged him into it.
From Michelle.
Hey, Prince Harry, remember when you told us to bring it at the Invictus Games?
Careful what you wish for. Boom.
Oh, really?
I didn't want to have to ask the Queen, because I didn't want to, back her into a corner. But when I showed her the video and I told her, she was like, right, what do we need to do? Let's do this.
Please.
Boom.
We went and we actually put up the Fox and Friends depiction of the Sol Invictus event on their show. They rode up in the Jaguar Beast. The woman who was riding the beast got out and they walked in with their little capstone flag that was black, representing the black sun. We had to sit there and watch this ritual being performed as it came down this hallway or a portal.
How could something so fair be so cruel when this black sun revolves around you? How could something so fair be so cruel when this black sun revolves around?
So the black sun was coming, the capstone was coming through the portal. Sol Invictus, the term is the unconquered sun. And this was the god of Mithricism, the god of the Roman legions, of the pagan world, Sol Invictus. That's where we started off with this, and that was the first connection to Orlando. Prince Harry came over, and Prince Harry connected with the Black Sun, Nazism, and all that, and their family came from a German background, even though they're the House of Windsor, but their background is German. And they came over here, and we had the Bushes and all them involved in the Wounded Warriors game, where basically, if you look at it from the Masonic point of view of reconstructing Osiris, the Wounded Warriors game was about warriors who had lost parts of themselves. And through prosthetics and stuff, they're able to compete again. In a way, it symbolizes the putting the pieces of Osiris back together. After ISIS has been marching across the Middle East, destroying Christianity, here you have the putting together the pieces of Osiris ritualistically at the Sol Invictus game. Then we got into some other events. What was the next event, Chris, that occurred in Orlando?
It was the shooting of Christina Grimmie.
What did we see there ritualistically or symbolically with this story?
Well, the biggest thing is the symbol and the band that she played with called Before You Exit. And their tour was called All the Lights. And we know Lucifer is the god of false light and false peace.
Can you explain that symbol that's in the background where the exit sign is and that symbol as she's walking around the stage?
Yeah, the symbol is actually a satanic cross. The band may not be aware of that because their managers and the people above them are the ones that tell them what to wear. They make the symbolism and they're the ones who market all of those things. But it is a satanic cross. It actually is a cross of Lucifer because the symbol is sulfur. The Latin word for Lucifer is phosphorus, and phosphorus is sulfur, and that symbol is sulfur. And it has the Ouroboros going around, and the triangle is the capstone that we talked about before with the coding of the 235 and the May 23rd, the word America coming on the Budweiser can. And then it's interesting because the shooter who shot Christina Grimmie was wearing red, white, and blue. And she is actually wearing a black dress with a upside down triangle right in front of her private area, which represents lunar female. And we know that New York represents the female aspect. And then California represents the male aspect. So you have the triangle on each corner that comes together. So if you have the Eye of Orlando representing the capstone and the top of the capstone going down to Missouri. And then you have the other part of the capstone going down to California, which one of our viewers pointed out that California is representative of the phoenix. The other side of the capstone represents New York. So we have been able to piece this puzzle together a little bit further to show that the belt of Orion represents California, Missouri, New York. And then you have the capstone, the Eye of Horus, right there in Florida. And it's real interesting because I had a friend of mine email me and ask me about A Prisoner of the Sun and the movie, because it shoots out from the pyramids electromagnetic frequencies, and it mentions the return of Osiris.
If the legend is true, there are riches beyond belief buried in them.
We shall go deeper into the history of this mysterious land than any has gone before. I believe that what we will find will change history.
A long time ago,
they are not human.
Visitors came from the skies. They were called Osiris.
Oh, something's wrong. Something's really wrong.
The Osiris wanted Earth for themselves.
I believe that we'll find the treasure in the deepest and most dangerous part of the labyrinth.
So beautiful.
That will not stop me!
Told me the storyline of Christina Grimmie. You told me the story was, here she is, and you hear, this is what I hear superficially, is that she's extending her arms out into a crucifix, and that this fan who's in love with her comes up and shoots her 3 times. And then I go, well, that's very symbolic of the cross. That's Christ had 3 spikes driven through him and crucified him. And then I said, well, there's a lot more to this story, and other people have picked up on that too. These rituals, this ritual with Christina, the ritual with Sol Invictus, and the ritual with the Pulse nightclub shooting. These are rituals, and these 3 are connected to Orlando, like the 3 points that we were talking about with Orion's belt.
Women, you want attention? Orion, that's a pretty name. What's this?
This is just so strange because it says, I am unconquered, basically, in yellow. And who's unconquered? The black sun god is unconquered? Well, Lucifer is unconquered, you know?
Yeah, and even in text it says that their sun god, Jupiter, is the unconquered sun.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't the car say unconquered on it that they drive up on?
Yes, it says unconquered, and it has a logo on the front of it. It's a cat with the red sun behind it. And the Bible talks always about lions, about the lion going around seeing who he can devour, other than the Lion of Judah, which is Jesus. The symbolism just gets ridiculous to me. So I'm watching the Invictus games, and they're out front of Buckingham Palace with Prince Harry. Again, it has nothing to do with the participants. I'm just looking at the ritual. This just caught me as a very strange event when they have this car drive up right here with the trident on there. The I am is a trident. If you look at it, there's 3 points there. I am unconquered with the trident. And here comes one of the gals with a red outfit. And we know the woman who wears red in the Bible. So the woman in red's riding the beast is my interpretation here. Here we come with the capstone, with the I am trident there, and the black sun, coming down some portal. And I think Anthony and Chris and I have talked about coming down a portal, right? Coming through something. The capstone is coming through something.
The door of Jubilees.
Yeah, the door of Jubilees. Why else do this? Why else ride up in a vehicle and bring the capstone through with the woman in red? The I am there also represents the eye of Lucifer in the capstone on the dollar bill that you're seeing there. Now, again, I'm not denigrating these men that are involved in it or the commentator, the woman in the red. I'm saying the symbolism of what you're watching. The sun color of the yellow. And they come through the gates, right? There's our gates. They came through the gates.
The gates of Ishtar.
Yeah, it makes me think of CERN. That's what it makes me think of. So it comes out of the portal. This is just such a strange event when I was just witnessing it. I'm just going, this is just so strange. And then they set this thing down here, and it's the capstone. That's about it for this narration. I'm just saying it just looks really ridiculous having Prince Harry involved with this, knowing what the royals are connected to the beast system. And just to see this sitting there like that is a little much for me. We were talking about with New York City and the goddess. We're talking about the arch in St. Louis. We're talking about San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge. The 3 points of what we're saying is the belt of Orion going across the country as they're progressing from the old order to the new order, to the phoenix taking off. And then it connects all back here at this point that we're calling the capstone or the Eye of Horus of Orlando, because we have the Eye of Orlando. And the 3 events, now rituals associated with Orlando. Sol Invictus, Christina being killed, and the Pulse nightclub. And I thought it's interesting because 2016 is the year of pulses. Pulses being legumes, things like that. That's the surface story for it. But if you get into the depth of understanding what a pulse can be a frequency or a wave or a scalar wave. It also gets into an area of physics called pulse physics. And there's dark pulse physics, which I found very interesting since CERN's so obsessed with dark matter and the dark universe. When you read one of the definitions of pulse means a pushing, putting pressure and pushing. When you look at the Illuminati and their use of pushing the herd of humanity into a direction, the Pulse nightclub was a pushing or a forcing us into this gun control debate. Whether you believe this event's real or not, to explain the 911 calls, to point out the lies, the inconsistencies, the gag orders being put on the sheriff's departments throughout Florida about this Pulse nightclub shooting. So when Chris and I looked at the Christina aspect of this, we went, okay, so we have a ritual. We have her representing Christ. We have Christ in her name. We got 3 spikes being driven through her in the sense of bullets or metal being driven through her and crucified, extinguishing her voice, the show that she came from. And then we got the symbol of her standing on the stage of the dragon, being killed by a character that's a very interesting spitting image of this character, Tintin, who's a prisoner of the sun. And there's connections there also to the Tin Man in Oz with not having a heart. See, he's supposed to be in love with her, but he kills her. It's like heartless. The point of this is we're watching a ritual. We know we're watching a ritual. Regardless of the actors involved, whether they know they're involved or not, who dies and who doesn't die, we can see the symbolism of the events being played out here. What we found interesting about this is that what does these rituals spell out? What's the message being communicated here? And we came up with basically, I think, a rough interpretation of what's going on here. I saw what was an advantage for us in reshooting this, that Neptune Diaries just came out with something on Christina before we went on the air right now, and I thought he did a great job of being very respectful to her, being a nice Christian young lady that earned her crown. It was a very nice, respectful piece. But he came up with defining like we were defining the players in the ritual. This is what he came up with Christina Victoria Grimmie. He said that she was the uncompromising, victorious, and conquering follower of Christ. And she was killed by Kevin James Lobel, the heel catching supplanter of the brave lion who has been beautiful and truthful since the beginning. He's saying that the Kevin character is playing Lucifer and he's killing the Christ character. And the Christ character has this term, uncompromising, victorious. Sol Invictus is the unconquered son. What I came up with as far as what I felt led to say is that this ritual that happened with Orlando, the ritual and the way I see it is that the message being communicated is that the unconquered son, and Orlando does mean fame throughout the land. The unconquered son's fame will spread throughout the land as the voice or the Christian voice is extinguished or silenced. And that is the message that I came up with that I believe is also correct in looking at this, the Orlando Matrix rituals. There's plenty more in here. I mean, we got into looking at Orlando and how this was established and why do we have these things going on there. We have the connections to Wild Bill Donovan and the CIA establishing Walt Disney World and setting up Disney in Orlando as an intelligence operation for doing the mind control testing, MK Ultras and all this other mind control stuff. So this Orlando area is an intelligence area of the intelligence agencies. We had Wild Bill Donovan connected to the OSS. Coming out of World War II, we have the OSS being established in Rockefeller Plaza with Wild Bill Donovan, with the Rockefellers. Then we have the connections between, my favorite connections through the Operation Paperclip. We got Walt Disney sitting there shaking hands with Werner von Braun, the Nazi rocket scientist who headed up NASA, which was also in Florida. So we definitely have an intelligence operation running this whole center of Florida, this Orlando area, establishing this Orlando area for Disney and running their MK Ultra mind control stuff through this Disney complex. So it's kind of like having the candy store on top of the House of Horrors, if you want to put it that way. And as you can tell, they use the media. Disney's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, media conglomerate out there. And it was firmly backed by CIA. So this shows you that we got a lot of stuff going on here with Orlando. Now, we think it's the Eye of Horus in the sense of a completion of the capstone over the United States. And I think that coincides with what we found with Casey from Enter the Stars a couple years back when we actually went over the American pentagram. So we have the belt of Orion going across, capstone completed with Orlando over the American pentagram.
I think this is a ritual, of course, of opening the gate.
For him, it was the dream and the culmination of a lifetime. His name was Joseph Strauss. His title, Chief Engineer, Golden Gate Bridge and Highway District. Joseph Strauss is the man who led a corps of creative engineers and a legion of rugged men in designing and building the Golden Gate Bridge. Few people remember today, but for 15 years before the steel was formed for the Golden Gate Bridge, it was regarded by many as the bridge that could not be built. In 1918, the city engineer of San Francisco approached Joseph Strauss, then a consulting engineer with a long list of bridge contracts to his credit. The city engineer asked if a bridge could be built across the Golden Gate at a reasonable cost. After 3 years of study, Strauss replied that it could for $27 million. This was in 1921. Such a bridge was an obvious need. San Francisco Bay formed a 50-mile-long barrier to highway traffic in the San Francisco area. And the entrance from the sea, known as the Golden Gate, separated the growing city on the south from the lightly populated and excellent recreation areas of Marin County. While a bridge was an obvious need, it was not an obvious possibility. The challenge was not to bridge a river or a valley, but an arm of the ocean. The proposed bridge was this one, impressive in its simplicity, modern in its concept. The center span from tower to tower would be 4,200 feet long, the longest ever attempted in that time. The side spans would each be 1,125 feet long. The roadway would be some 250 feet above the choppy waters of the bay. That was how matters stood in 1921. 11 years of stormy controversy followed. The opponents raised many objections. Some said the bridge couldn't possibly be built. Other critics said the bridge would cost an exorbitant sum, almost $100 million. And to a city that remembered a disastrous earthquake, there was an ominous note. The bridge would be only a few miles from the San Andreas Fault. The battle was fought vigorously in the courts and in the newspaper columns. But the dreamers and the builders won out. Construction began officially on January 5th, 1933.
The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers.
Why are you telling me all these things?
The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers. The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers.
Because we've explained the 888 across America and the Phoenix, the symbolism of California. The Phoenix is associated with Thoth and Mercury, the messenger. We were talking about the symbolism of the Order of the Dragon, which is the sulfuric symbol, and the Ouroboros going around with a capstone on the stage of before you exit. Well, sulfur is related with fire, masculinity, the soul, but it's also related to Satanism, the devil, and the fire of hell. And salt is related with the physical body, crystallization, and chemical reactions. So this is a ritual with the sigil that Tim was talking about before, with Christina wearing the upside down triangle and the other triangle being on stage. And I'm sure that they're doing some type of satanic rituals behind the scene for all of this to happen, to sacrifice her to their sun god, with her representing the moon, the female aspect, and the raising of Sol Invictus.
Yeah, and I just thought the more we dug, I mean, there's a lot to dig into. You can either go to the mind control, the CIA, the intelligence agencies that are running this whole big operation of mind control on the United States and the world populations, or you can go into the Christina's backstory. Who was her manager, Chris? Did we tell them that?
No, her manager was Selena Gomez's stepfather, and he actually found her on YouTube as a YouTube star, and I think he was looking for someone else to manage during that time. And so he is her manager, which is Selena Gomez's stepfather. He actually raised a lot of money for her family after her death, too.
Right. And, you know, Selena Gomez, when she got her fame, she was on the Disney program called Wizards of Waverly Place, where it's basically a witchcraft family. So here we go with Disney and witchcraft and the occult and all those connections again. We got a young lady who was sacrificed on the stage of the Order of the Dragon as part of a bigger ritual, talking about that the forces of Antichrist, the fame of the Antichrist will spread throughout the land as the Christian voice is silenced.
You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you. But I have already dined, and I never drink wine.
An ancestor? I see a resemblance.
The Order of the Dracul. The dragon. An ancient society, pledging my forefathers to defend the church against all enemies of Christ. The relationship was not entirely successful.
Oh, yes.
It is no laughing matter. We, Draculs, have a right to be proud. What devil or witch was ever so great as a killer whose blood flows in these veins? Blood. Is too precious a thing in these times. The warlike days are over. The victories of my great race are but a tale to be told. I am the last of my kind.
I have offended you with my ignorance, Count. Forgive me.
And that's what I think the message of what we're seeing, and the message of trying to shut up the truth. And that was also the other thing that I wanted to get into with the verse on deception. They will believe a lie, they will deceive and be deceived themselves. The operation that the CIA has been doing since World War II, since Wild Bill Donovan, since the disinformation campaign, since the establishment of the 2012 NDAA domestic propaganda amendments, where they can just blatantly lie to the United States citizens and not be held culpable, is that lying in and of itself. If you do this in a marriage, if you're married to somebody who lies all the time, the message gets communicated to, I don't know who you are, and I can't trust anything you say, and then that relationship dissolves. It's the same method with when you spread lies on a societal level. The society breaks down as a whole because nobody can trust what's being communicated or said. Civilization can't operate under the pressure of serial lies. And as we've seen with Barack Obama, his disinformation campaign is to be a serial liar to the public. The Attorney General serial lies to the public. Everybody up there is lying. Why are they all lying? It's a systemic psyop on the American people to destroy the fabric of culture, to destroy the fabric of civilization. It's also the trademark of Lucifer. He was a liar and a murderer, right? That's what they say about Satan. He's a liar and a murderer from the beginning. So the world of the Golden Age, or paganism, or Lucifer's age, is a world of do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which means it doesn't matter if you lie, if it's a means to an end. But as some other commentators have said, what comes out of this is a spirit of madness is unleashed on a society. The people who are lying and deceiving forget the truth. They no longer know what the truth is, and there's a spirit of madness which spreads. Therefore, you will bring down the United States off of having the fruit. This is the fruit of the seeds of deception that have been orchestrated since the 40s in this country by this Nazi occult shadow government that we have allowed to just plant the seeds of lies nonstop through the media, through the CIA buying up Capitol records and then basically running ABC and taking the radio, taking the movie, taking everything over and just doing disinformation, lying campaigns.
President, earlier this year you told us you had ordered your administration to cease and desist on payments to journalists to promote your agenda. You cited the need for ethical concerns and the need for a bright line between the press and the government. Your administration continues to make the use of video news releases, which are prepackaged news stories sent to television stations, fully aware that some or many of these stations will air them without any disclaimer that they are produced by the government. Comptroller General of the United States this week said that raises ethical questions. Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
There is a Justice Department opinion that says these pieces are within the law so long as they're based upon facts, not advocacy. And I expect our agencies to adhere to that ruling, to that Justice Department opinion. This has been a long-standing practice of the federal government to use these types of videos. The Agricultural Department, as I understand, has been using these videos for a long period of time. The Defense Department, other departments have been doing so. It's important that they be based upon the guidelines set out by the Justice Department. Now, I think it'd be helpful if local stations then disclose to their viewers if that's, that this was based upon a factual report and they chose to use it. But evidently in some cases that's not the case. So anyway.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest
responsibility
is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
This video, obtained by ABC News, appears to show the fury of the Turkish attack on the border town of Tel Aviv.
A border town bombarded by Turkey's military. This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military bombing Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town. The Kurds who fought alongside the U.S. against ISIS. Now, horrific reports of atrocities committed by Turkish-backed fighters on those very allies.
Destroying the fabric of reality. The chaos that comes out of that will bring in the Antichrist. So we can see, I think, in a big macroscopic scale, that all these rituals and lies are being done to tear down the old order, the beautiful, civilized behavior of a Christian-run country where the population internalized the Ten Commandments in their heart and the Holy Spirit ran their daily lives without the need of standing armies and all this kind of stuff to police a population. And that really is what Tocqueville, when he came over from France and said, what made America great? He said, well, these are moral people. Well, the CIA, Donovan, Casey, Bushes, all these people have been propagating their occult agenda to just keep promoting lie after lie after lie. The Clintons, the Obamas, is just one nonstop mess of lies to tear down the fabric of reality. And so I think that's what we're looking at this time.
A viewer of ours, Joan, posted her blog, and she did a lot of in-depth research on the number 8 and the gods that represent the number 8, which is the moon and the sun. She also did gematria on Trump. Trump means 88, and Donald J. Trump means 888.
Delivery.
Mysterious glowing. Object arrives on front doorstep. Messenger not sighted. What could you be? An alien artifact? A bringer of life? Oh, you're a box. Very handsome. Commanding. Where did you come from? Now, if my measurements are correct, Great Scott!
gentlemen, welcome to the Donald Trump Museum, dedicated to America's #1 citizen and America's greatest living folk hero, the one and only Donald Trump. Learn the amazing history of the Trump family.
Somebody criticized me the other day because they asked me what I do, and I said, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. It's true. I don't care.
Friends, and I guess I have some very good enemies, and I like it that way somehow, and I really believe in trashing your enemies.
Inside, you will learn how Donald Trump's father left him a large inheritance.
Nobody's going to do more women than Donald Trump. That I can tell you. That I can tell you. And I think they know it.
Discover how in 2016 Donald Trump successfully lobbied to legalize gambling.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich.
He wants to run for president and move on into the White House. Why not?
Share in the stupidity of the average American as they made him the 45th president of the United States.
That will easily go down as the greatest president in the history of the United States. Me, Donald John Trump.
No! Hey, no! Hey, great, you come with us upstairs. There you go, Sonny. We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
The Freemasons have the apotheosis of Washington in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., of Washington becoming God, which is the same as Titus becoming God in the apotheosis. So man being God, and being God, they keep repeating this. What do they want to do these days with Kurzweil, transhumanism, and all these other things? They want to make man God. Michio Kaku saying that, nanobots can replace the synaptic material of the brain until you just have a schematic brain. And in a future show, we'll get really heavy duty into the brain chips of IBM and other things of the hive mind that we have been researching for so long. But this show is specifically just to show the in plain sight rebellion of modern man through the United Nations and all these global leaders, that they are doing the same thing the Titus Arch resents. They are going to rebel, declare themselves God, and we have no need of a God because we are our own gods. That really came home for me when I looked at this event that I became aware of off of watching a Fox News presentation called the Invictus Games. Where do we get the name Invictus from, Chris?
From the sun god, Sol Invictus.
And when is that birthday, Sol Invictus, celebrated?
December 25th.
You've all been missing, presumed dead for 5.5 years.
If you'd seen us that afternoon, we looked like a typical American family returning home from vacation. My brother Ben and his twins, Olive and Cal. But what you couldn't see is that Cal's leukemia wasn't responding to treatment.
This flight is oversold. We are offering travel vouchers for...
That's me. So Grace and Olive and my folks took the first flight home. Funny how one little decision can ruin your life, but also save it. Excuse me, what exactly is the problem?
The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is you've all been missing, presumed dead for 5.5 years.
I don't understand. You haven't aged a day.
Olive.
Where's Mom?
Your mom got sick.
No, Dad! No, no!
Your cell regeneration model?
It works.
We've been treating pediatric patients for 30 months.
We pick up with the same regimen, right where we left off.
There's a new treatment protocol for pediatric cases. If we get a jump in the treatment, the odds are excellent.
Didn't expect you getting back to work this fast.
A lot has changed since you've been gone.
Who is she?
It was 2 years before I even looked at another one.
Even before I got on that plane, I lost sight of your life. We're gonna fix that. I'm not going anywhere.
The universe just gave all of us a do-over.
Everything checks out. It's as if the plane never left the sky.
Do I have to say out loud that that's impossible?
I think we've taken impossible off the table.
Is your mind messing with you? Earlier today, I heard a voice in my head.
Keep it to yourself. What do you think? The government just forgot about us?
Just maybe he came back to be saved, and I came back to save him.
How'd you know I was here?
I just knew.
What is this? There were a lot of people on that plane. What makes us so special?
What's the probability it's just you and me?
No one can explain what happened to us. Some people called it impossible. Others called it a miracle. All I know is whatever force brought us all here had no interest in being investigated. This was just the beginning.
They worship themselves, essentially. They believe that they have within them the means to attain from the tree of life and live forever without having to deal with God, without needing a savior, without having to be atoned for the filth of the flesh. And they are of their father, the devil. That's who runs Israel right now, people. That's just the way it is. And not just Israel, but Washington, D.C., Paris, France, New York, New York. This is the New World Order, and the synagogue of Satan is directly behind it all. They're liars, people. Not all Jews are a part of this. You understand? It's very, very difficult, and you'll never figure it out and understand it if you're not in the Spirit of Christ, because it witnesses the truth. I don't hate the Jews. I hate the synagogue of Satan because they are the seed of Satan. And they're out to destroy, kill, and steal men's souls. Just be aware that you're in this spiritual war, and you're not battling against men. These are spiritual powers and principalities, wickedness in high places. It's a spirit that can only be fought through the Spirit of the living God by Jesus Christ. It's the only way to defeat this.
Here we got the sun worshipers, and everybody's heard for a long time that, we've been doing the worshipers of the moon versus the worshipers of the sun. We discussed CERN being over the temple of the sun with the Apollyon, and in Jerusalem and things with the temples of the moon. There's those who worship the sun, those who worship the moon, and a lot of this stuff goes back to sun worship. I just found that this one was connected to the royal family through Prince Harry, and it's a very interesting game. It's basically to support wounded warriors.
It really bothered me for a few things. I mean, we know that Prince Harry claims that he is an inheritor of the royalties, of the royal family, and I do believe, in my opinion, that's the bloodline of Cain. But it really bothered me because it says, I am. Jesus is I am. He is the light of the world. Jesus is the great I am. And so when I keep seeing this, I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul, it really bothered me because Jesus should be the captain of everybody's soul.
There's 8s coming up everywhere, all over the place.
And what are the chances that Christina Grimmie's on a stage doing a ritual she doesn't understand, as she's going to be a sacrifice she doesn't even know,
right,
on the stage?
Right.
And what are the chances that the band is called Before You Exit and all the lights? And how does this tie with Brexit?
Do you see them? The rings of Saturn.
I do.
The question is, what is 5/6?
The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers. The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers. The Golden Gate Bridge is the longest span between two towers.
Why are you telling me all these things?